We are your hosts, Derek and Gina England, and excited to be here with you today. Babe, why don't you tell them a little bit about us and our family?
Hey. So like you said, we're Derek and Gina England. We've been married for 21 years. We have 2 children. We have a 16-year-old daughter named Sawyer and a 15-year-old son named Jack. We also live with their pets. Our daughter has a 3-year-old golden retriever named Boaz, who runs the show here, I think. And then our son has an 8-year-old bearded dragon named Speed. They're a lot of fun.
They're a joy to be around and be with. So as we dive through this, we are not professionals. We're not counselors. We don't have a psychology degree, but we are parents of a son, parents of a daughter, and we've had the experience of doing ministry together for a long time. I've served on a men's ministry for many years, and then helping lead Family ID, which stands for Intentional Direction, Family Intentional Direction. And we help families discover who God created them to be with clarity on identity, purpose, and direction, and then how to live that out inside their family. And it's really what changed us and our family direction for 12 years ago. And so what we're going to do throughout this podcast is not share that family can be like us, but we're going to give helpful and encouraging tips, tools, and practices that we've learned throughout ministry, that Greg Gunn, who founded Family ID, that he has learned, and kind of compile everything that we've learned, plus stories of other families as an encouraging way for you to say, I had no idea that family could be like that. All right, we're talking about the 3 questions that every parent needs to answer for their sons and daughters. It's a paperback book that Family ID has put together, and we have it in a completely free downloadable ebook for you. And there are 3 questions that I believe that I've learned throughout the years that every parent needs to answer for their sons and daughters. And what I mean by that is sons and daughters are asking these questions innately and internally, and they might not even be verbalizing or vocally saying or asking these questions, but they're all related in identity. Mm-hmm. And at Family ID, we know that, hey, the family unit begins with who God created you to be and the identity of that family, and it flows down to the individual of individual identity, and a parent answering these questions with a positive yes, because they can be answered with a no, but answering these questions with a yes is what helps build that strong and firm identity in your sons and daughters, in our son and in our daughter, and helps them to move forward with confidence.
So, Derek, I think a good starting point would be, how did you have the revelation that 3 questions are being asked by our kids?
It's a good question. So I didn't know. I didn't know. It was in 2011. I went to a men's retreat, and it was based on John Eldridge's Wild at Heart. And he proposed and taught that every young man has 2 questions that he needs to be answered, and primarily by his father. And I'll cover those here in a sec. But if I walked out of there thinking and realizing that I was asking those questions or seeking answers to those questions throughout so many seasons of my life. And if I had questions, then that means Jack had questions. Yeah. And if he had questions, that means his sister probably had some questions, and they probably weren't the same. And if she had questions, then that meant you had questions. And so it was, okay, what are these questions? And I'm not saying I found them all, but it was the realization that, okay, it is based on identity and answering these. When did you find out?
So I didn't know these questions were a thing. All growing up throughout childhood, I didn't realize that I was seeking answers to these questions from my own parents, even though I was, and craving and desiring that. And so I remember when you came home from that camp and saying, hey, every son has questions to answer. And I remember you coming home from the same camp or maybe a different year and just saying, okay, this is what sons need to know. This is what daughters need to know. But I always had the thought or the mindset that those answers would come from the dad. And I think I believed that for many, many years. Like, okay, this is on you. Just knowing that the weight of a dad's words is so much heavier than the weight of a mom's. So I would say that I didn't have the realization that I needed to be answering these questions as well until recently. And by the grace of God, He has allowed me to answer those questions for the kids throughout their life. But I didn't know that I needed to intentionally be answering them.
Sure.
So,
I agree. That's the thing is I think so many parents don't know that their kids have questions that
mhm,
they're seeking answers to who they are. And so then when they do realize that it's too late
right.
and they feel like it's too late and they feel like they've missed it.
Mhm.
So the questions, before getting too deep, questions. What 3 questions do your sons need answers to, and what 3 questions do your daughters need answers to? A lot of this does come from John Eldridge's teaching at Wild at Heart, and his wife Stacy Eldridge. Those two together, I think, wrote the book Captivating, which deals more with a young woman's heart and a women's heart. But for your son, he's asking 3 questions, and that is, am I important to you? Will you fight for me? And do I have what it takes? Those are the 3 questions to the heart of every young man. And for every young woman, it is, will you fight for me? Do you see me? And am I beautiful? These are the questions that they need answered inside the home, because if we can answer those inside the home, then they're operating with confidence as they go and move out into the world. And so over the next several series, several videos, we'll be helping to unpack those question by question on what does it mean if we answer those questions? What does it mean if we don't answer those questions? And really just some encouraging stories and tools and resources and ideas on how to answer those questions for your sons and for your daughters.
And I think you brought up a good point right before we went into the 3 questions. And that was, okay, is it too late? And the answer is no, it's not too late, because at any age, well, I'm a mom now, but I'm always going to be a daughter, and I'm always going to be a mom. And so for me, my parents can answer these questions, continue to answer these questions for me. So it doesn't matter what age. If your kids are out of the home, fight for them and answer these questions for them. If they're in the home, fight for them and answer the questions. But it's never too late to answer these questions, no matter the age of your children.
Yeah. And what I think is neat about these questions is they speak they speak to the heart and to the identity and value of our kids. I think as young men and women growing up, of course, those in the Christian faith, they feel like there's a calling, right? Oh, I want to know what's God's calling for my life. What am I supposed to be when I grow up? And it is an individual, but it is understanding how the family primarily answers those questions and builds confidence into that, because God might call a young man or woman to be something fantastic and great and super hard to accomplish. But what level of confidence do they have to achieve that, to go do that? And I think that builds and begins inside the home. And for both the sons and the daughters, the questions are 2 sides of the same coin. It is really, hey, am I important to you? And do you see me? They're different reflections,
Right.
but still generalized around the same question.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes boom, boom, boom for all 3, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you see for women on if these questions, and we'll dive into more individual of the questions in the future videos, but in general, what do you see when young women don't have these questions answered, and how does that steer or direct their life going forward?
I see when young women don't get these questions answered that they go outside of the family looking for that validation, looking for that affirmation, whether that's in relationships or in social media, getting affirmations through likes and popularity through there. So I see that they turn away from looking inward to the family for that validation and looking for it elsewhere.
Yeah, because it's all identity based, right?
Right.
I think it's the same thing for guys. We were talking off camera about, hey, I think every young guy wants his dad to be his friend, about how every young man wants to have the confidence and have his family believe in him. And he is important. They will fight for him. He does have what it takes.
Right.
And I've seen, especially with my time with the men's ministry, of man after man after man told his story and talked about how he took his questions to sports or women or money or career or music or whatever it was the next thing that if he could accomplish or achieve in that, then he could prove to the whole world that he is important.
Right.
He did have what it takes, and on and on and on.
Right.
And I think it's the lack of identity and confidence that brings that insecurity out.
Yeah. And I think when you look for those validations elsewhere outside of the family, it steers your life in a way that it wasn't supposed to go at times, that we take a different course looking for those answers than the course that we should be on.
It reminds me of, you saying steering different course, reminds me of James. When James talks about, hey, when we, like a man who's tossed to and fro by the waves, or a man who forgets who he is as soon as he walks away from the mirror. Because he's looking for something out there and not steadfast or believing in who he actually is.
That's good.
How do you see boys and girls, young boys or young girls, express these questions differently? Like, how do you see the difference? We have a son, we have a daughter. How do you see the differences in just them at young ages growing up and kind of expressing or looking for the answers to these questions?
I see that in our own daughter, looking for those questions relationally with us. Like, it's in the time spent with her. It's in the words that we use. I see it more from our son in his capabilities, his overall capacity. I see him more in doing and her more in being. And that's just specific to our two kids, because I know that God wires all of our children so uniquely and individually. But for ours, I see Sawyer as being more relational and putting in that time with her, that face-to-face time, letting her know she is beautiful, showing her ways that will fight for her in time, things like that. And I think with Jack, it's more activity-based, more action-based.
I wonder how much that plays in. You and I read that book years ago on men are like waffles, women are like spaghetti, to where if there's one thing in a female's life, then it touches everything else, right? So it is more relational and holistic compared to men. It's compartmentalized. It's easy for them to be compartmentalized. So the performance or capacity, hey, I might be really good at this one thing. My little waffle square's full.
Right.
But I'm empty in another, and that's okay because I can move on to the next one, and that one's full, and it moves on and on.
Right. Whereas women the female mind, I think, is more intertwined, like spaghetti, which I easily relate to being Italian. So I can just visualize a nice plate of spaghetti and meatballs right now.
But I think young kids have a tendency to express these questions easier and even verbally instead of, or more than older kids, young teens or older teens, young adults.
Sure.
I can think back on, Jack doing something and looking over, did I do a good job? Are you proud of me? And like asking those questions, or Sawyer coming in and asking, do you see, like those words coming, I don't know if she ever did, but I can imagine those words coming out of her mouth. Or I think of other situations where you see a kid kick a ball, throw a ball, play the piano, whatever it is and then they actually ask at an early age, hey, did I do a good job?
Right.
And they're looking for that. Okay, check that box. I did a good job. Mom and dad believe in me. Or, how important are siblings in that?
Oh, I think siblings are vital in just being their peer, looking to their peer and being validated by them, saying, I believe in you and I'm proud of you. And I've seen our kids champion each other, that I feel like it increases their confidence and their self-esteem. And I can see the opposite happening. When you have that relationship where a sibling tears one another down, it does create a sense of lower self-esteem or sense of vulnerability and causes some angst to, okay, do I even try something new in case they've failed? So I think that the sibling relationships where you're encouraging the sibling is vitally important.
I think so too. I think I heard recently that at a young age, the voice inside our head is actually our parents' voice. Right? Until you grow, or I don't know how true that is, but I can't remember what my voice was when I was little, but until you grow and develop your own personal identity, then you're hearing the identity that has been spoken over you by others, whether that is parents or siblings. I can think of, for myself or for others, especially like guys in my men's group, that what people said about them over and over at a young age, even if they didn't mean any harm or anything by it, that's what they believed of themselves from that point going on, whether it's good or bad. You didn't see this. I watched this. It was a series on Netflix called Swamp Kings. And it's okay. It's probably not the best ever, but it's about...
You're not endorsing it?
Yeah, I'm not endorsing it. The University of Florida, and during the series, when during the seasons that they would win a couple national championships, and it kind of followed the coach and some of the players, and Tim Tebow was on there. And he said, there was one line that stuck with me, and it said, Tim said, when your parents tell you every single day that you can do anything you want and you can change the world, at some point you just start to believe it.
I love that.
I do too. I mean, I think we can do that as parents, and I encourage everybody to do that as parents. It's just to be the most encouraging and uplifting voice in your kids' lives, because they need it.
Right.
And I don't mean false, I don't mean hollow, but I mean find something and make sure that as kids are growing up and developing, that we are that voice of encouragement. We are that voice of hope. We are that voice of, I'm proud of you and I believe in you and you are incredible and you are unique and God created you just perfect the way he did. I think we can do that as parents.
Right. And I think scripture, further emphasizes that through our words. Like, our words bringing life? Are they bringing death? And I would say, as a parent, make sure that your words are infusing life to your children, because it's easy to tear down. And I think scripture tells us to avoid those things, from Ephesians 4:29, we're to build each other up and encourage each other with our words.
I think we can. And I think when we do that over and over, we build this framework in our kids of, if we tell them in 100 different scenarios that they can do stuff and that they're good at stuff, or we're watching them and not watching our phones or TV or some other tablet or screen, then it reinforces that we see them, we hear them, we're for them, we believe in them. And if that's the case, then at some point they just start to believe it.
Right.
They can go change the world.
That's right.
Okay, next videos, we'll be diving farther into 3 questions every parent needs to answer for their sons and daughters. We'll be taking it question by question and talking about why it's important, how we answer it, how we can do it as parents, what happens if we don't. And I encourage you, Family ID produced this book. Buy it on Amazon. It's designed to be a beautiful piece of coffee table decoration to lay on your table. And if not, hey, we have a completely free downloadable version.
Right.
So go get that. We'll link it all in the show notes, and we'll be taking it over the next couple of videos, question by question on what we need to answer and how we do that for our kids.
Right. And I'm so excited to dive deep into these questions with you, because I believe that it can change the trajectory of families and bless our sons and daughters.
Yep, it did for us.